Please welcome the U.S. Representative for Arkansas's 2nd Congressional District, Congressman French Hill.
Good morning. I want to thank you for that kind introduction and the welcome to be here with you. And first, let me extend my deep appreciation to Sam Brownback and Katrina Lanto-Sweat for their leadership of this summit. It's an honor to be one of the congressional co-chairs for this year's International Religious Freedom Summit. We gather today with the respect and advocacy of the natural rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The instruments drafted by men that enshrine those rights, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees freedoms concerning religious expression, peaceful assembly, and the right to petition the government. Article 18 of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948, which states, "Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience of religion. This right includes the freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion of belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance." It is through this obligation of service to our fellow man that we can make our societies better for our children and for future generations yet to be born. We gather today in brotherly goals of the first ministerial to advance religious freedom held in 2018, led by President Trump and Ambassador Brownback. That ministerial demonstrated that the United States proudly stands for religious liberty and tolerance so that everyone from all nations can worship freely and without discrimination. I agree with President Ronald Reagan when he addressed the UN General Assembly in 1986. He said, "Respect for human rights is not social work. It's not merely an act of compassion. It is the first obligation of government and the source of its legitimacy." This is a fundamental position of America's domestic and foreign policy. Global leadership efforts include, in 2018, Pope Francis and the Grand Imam at the Al-Azhar Mosque in Egypt signing the document on human fraternity for a world peace and living together. And with Pope Francis urging tolerance and understanding between the two faiths, it was an important acknowledgement of our shared tradition. Today, we gather in Washington and we confront a brutal reality. Digitally, people of devout faith are not respected, well accepted, or understood by the many active on social media, self-absorbed vanity machines. And today we gather and we face the grim reality in the shadow of the daily atrocities in Ukraine, imprisonment, indoctrination, and genocide in China, the resurgence of religious extremism in Afghanistan, and the attacks by terrorists on innocent Christians in Nigeria. Recent memories of the separation from our communal faith and our holy places due to government-imposed mandates are fresh on our minds. In America during the pandemic, people of faith could not gather and worship, yet every Walmart or liquor store was open every day. Fortunately, these unreasonable limits on our personal freedoms were declared unconstitutional by our Supreme Court. And we gather today in the shadow of the struggles of the shared holy places in Jerusalem and in the Holy Land. Safeguarding the respectful coexistence of Christian and non-Christian communities in the sacred places that we share should be a priority for all the Abrahamic faiths. Over my years in the House, I've been drawn to religious tolerance in the important country of Egypt. In February 2017, I visited Cairo, just 2 months after the Advent suicide bombing of St. Peter and St. Paul Church, which killed 27. There's a patch on the wall in that church that was never cleaned and is now permanently encased in glass, where you can still see the blood of the women and children murdered that day by a coward as they prayed. We also remember all those cops that were murdered by terrorists, the dozens murdered by bombings during Palm Sunday procession, and pilgrims gunned down on multiple occasions by Islamic extremists. So I'm grateful for the leadership of President el-Sisi and the Egyptian government's acknowledgement and progress in ending the culture of impunity of crimes carried out against the Coptic Christians. This would not be possible without trusted and active engagement between the United States and Egypt as allies. But there is more to do. While some crimes have indeed met strict punishment, regular and expected prosecution of perpetrators of crimes against Christians remains critical. Just this last April, a Christian was shot 22 times and killed by 4 masked men. And although one of the alleged killers confessed by video, bragging about this, no arrest has been made. And on June 5th, a Muslim man with a long history of harassing cops knocked Abdul Hosni from his motorbike and hacked him to death with a meat cleaver. Here, the killer's family submitted a forged medical report seeking leniency. So there's more to do. Turning to Nigeria, the rot of religious intolerance there is deep and well known for years. And despite that, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken did not designate Nigeria as a country of particular concern in the most recent International Religious Freedom Report. Even after the most recent atrocities in Ondo State in the Christian south of the country, this is a deteriorating situation. And in my view, the United States Department of State's decision to remove Nigeria from the list of countries of particular concern is a mistake. This is particularly concerning, especially after numerous government and non-government reporting on the history of Nigeria's religious freedom violations. Further, the timing of the decision to remove Nigeria from the report last year, just days before Secretary Blinken visited the country to announce a multi-billion-dollar development assistance deal, is just another example of this administration giving carrots to bad actors while receiving little or no assurance that bad behaviors are changing. In contrast to the work in Egypt, this is antithetical to the American ideals and counterproductive to our long-term growth of democratic and religiously tolerant governments in the world. When the United States speaks out, other nations listen. And when religiously intolerant governments around the world noticed when there is no U.S. response. The result in Nigeria is no apprehensions, let alone trials for the recent murders that have taken place there. And finally, let me turn to China and the Chinese Communist Party, where churches are closed, pastors are arrested, and scriptures even being rewritten in a Chinese context. Recent days have brought sadness to me because of my great respect for Cardinal Zen and his arrest in Hong Kong. Hong Kong, it was such a breath of freedom for so many generations of people and such an extraordinary place. A place I've visited, and capitalism, freedom of expression, freedom of collective benefit was so on display there for many decades. So Cardinal Zen's arrest brings me sadness in one of the places that was the epitome of freedom in the world. And Tibet, for decades, we've all shared our concerns about the people of Tibet. But everyone here knows well the ongoing genocide against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province. But did you know that 45% of the world's supply of polysilicon for solar panels and 84% of China's cotton exports all are cultivated and developed in Xinjiang province? As citizens, we must continue the public naming and shaming while our governments collectively, and I emphasize the word collectively, must use the diplomatic and economic tools that we have to facilitate active and enforced legal and financial costs. It's my hope that global companies that have footprints in that province of China will not continue to stick their heads in the sand while the world learns more and more every day about this ongoing genocide against the Uyghurs there. Those gathered in this second annual International Religious Summit must join in one voice to combat religious persecution and ensure that a future where all mankind can freely exercise the religion of their choice without fear of retribution, imprisonment, or harm. I commend all of you in the global audience and here in Washington that you participate this week for your commitment to the protections of the individual freedom of religion and belief. And I pray for a successful ministerial next week with that same charge. We are continuously plagued by fundamental violations of human rights and, as the Europeans call it, frozen conflicts in Syria, Yemen, Georgia, Venezuela, the Korean Peninsula, and now the most recent outrages perpetrated by the illegal actions and illegal invasion of the sovereign nation of Ukraine. And yet God towers above all. While we mere humans strive for a thaw in those frozen conflicts, we can also fuel peace and resolution through our own prayer. And as President Reagan proclaimed in his 1981 inaugural Day of Prayer, while never willing to bow to a tyrant, our forefathers were always willing to get on their knees before God. And when catastrophe threatened, they turned to God for deliverance. So let's take President Reagan's advice. Again, it was an honor and a privilege to be with each of you today. Thank you for your commitment to freedom of religious tolerance and belief around this world. We're grateful for your personal engagement. It's an honor to represent the U.S. House today, and it's an honor to be a co-chairman of this summit. Thank you very much.